This is what I've put together from all my time in the Fire Emblem community. This has happened over and over again, from SNES to Game Boy Advance, GameCube, and Wii, to Fates and Awakening. Game Boy Advance times. This was during the era where SNES and Game Boy Advance were on fair terms. Level of toxicity was extremely low. At this time, it made the most sense for the entire community to move from one game to the next, instead of splitting it up. So the Fire Emblem community as a whole got behind each and every new release in the series as a whole. As Fire Emblem grew from this, a noticeable amount of toxicity began to rise from within the SNES community, and they began to trash talk the Sacred Stones community. Sacred Stones. The number of random toxic Thracia 776 elitists began to rise, and this hate spread through to Sacred Stones forums. Usually comments were, quote-unquote, "Sacred Stone sucks. Real Fire Emblem fans play Thracia." The amount of these comments were still infrequent at the time. I didn't pay much attention to this until later. Forbidden Game. Path of Radiance was the best Fire Emblem game to most during this era, as it brought the Fire Emblem communities back together to play on consoles. However, it gained a lot of loyal fans, and, just like the SNES games, did not like competition. So new console players for Path of Radiance gained a big increase of hate for not being good at Thracia 776 low turn count runs, while everyone fought each other. DS failures. During 2008, the Fire Emblem community began cheering for Shadow Dragon as a remake and throwback to the old games. This continued in 2010 with Fire Emblem 12 not coming to the West, and many Fire Emblem fans had begun to think the series would die. This was not limited to this occurrence only, as Fire Emblem elitists had been noted for doing this at every major Fire Emblem game release as well. Fast forward to Awakening. Fire Emblem ceases development of good games. Old Fire Emblem dies, and some transfer over to Awakening. SNES players decide to, quote-unquote, give the game a chance, by proceeding to say, quote-unquote, "It's not genealogy of the Holy War," and move on back to their games. For some forums featuring both games, if Awakening was popular, the Thracia crowd would troll the game as mentioned previously. This toxicity would transfer over to Reddit as well, so they could flank us on both fronts. The ultimate showdown, Fire Emblem Heroes. It took me a long time to piece together a proper understanding of why this keeps happening throughout each Fire Emblem game. Elitists have continued being toxic towards anything not genealogy of the Holy War. There were Fire Emblem streams I watched with big names that had their own mini fanbase. What I learned by watching those is that the big names controlled the masses, the Twitch chat, the viewer counts, the in-person crowds. They have the power over that. They created that Fire Emblem community. It was all the years of petty words and using the Fire Emblem community as a whole to become as big as they are now. It has gotten to the point where it doesn't matter what they do anymore. It's whatever they say goes, and no one will stand up to them, right or wrong, because they're scared. Mobile game or mainstream? Make up your minds. Mainstream tends to support consistent Let's Plays. They even managed to somehow tell Nintendo to back off when they got involved to copyright strike the streams and videos. This is a confusing gray area because they want Nintendo support too, but only for the mainstream community, not the Fire Emblem community as a whole. Some mainstream players have even publicly said they don't need Fire Emblem Heroes, and Fire Emblem can support itself like it has been doing for years. All of this makes no sense, and it's hard to say whether they want to be mainstream or mobile. But one thing is for certain, there are key people who clearly show they don't care about anything but mainstream, like Mecha and Mangs, for example. Mecha is someone who always stirs up drama and needlessly argues instead of staying in his own lane. He's always someone who immediately trashes Fire Emblem Heroes all the time, giving Fire Emblem players a bad name. Though people ridicule him for these type of things here and there, he always gets back to it because nobody actually cares what he does since he's a top Fire Emblem YouTuber. If he wants to trash on the entire universe, people just move on while he tries to make excuses for himself for all the dumb things he's done to the whole community. This gets wilder when you remember that he has a fanbase that grows with his nonsense, Like saying Amelia is a bad unit, when he should really be the one getting the back burner. Mangs is someone who constantly memes and does whatever he wants and doesn't care about anything. People like him are extremely dangerous. In his Fire Emblem community, some players were scared of what he would do all the time. More so even when he made a post saying he isn't gonna be politically correct. He took pleasure in giving the idea that he can do something wild that could have destroyed everything. Why should anyone allow this history of recklessness? But it gets a pass because old fans said so. Corrections. When I say the Fire Emblem community and the Fates and Awakening community are separate, I mean that the entire Fire Emblem community is clearly divided into two separate groups. We have been separated ever since Awakening. I do not mean the entire Fire Emblem community is toxic, but it does have a history of bashing other communities, and that needs to be acknowledged properly. Obviously, there are different types of Fire Emblem players who are just fans of their own game, but do not bother or trash other games. They coexist with other communities in general, and some even help out other games. There's some Fire Emblem veteran players that stay to watch streams of other games. This is what I mean by being part of the Fire Emblem community. I do not have any problems with veteran fans like this. If anything, I'm sorry for not correcting my statements earlier. The elitist community would not care about these things. They would trash everything and everyone and just yell, "Genealogy of the Holy War is the greatest game of all time!" Those types of people are the real problem. I have no problem with veteran players playing Fire Emblem Heroes. However, I do care about the possibility of them using another Fire Emblem game to just grow their own community and then trash the other one in one go while I watch this repeating pattern. I have a problem with people not controlling their fanbase because they just don't care or know what they're doing. Yes, there is a chance they are actually here to play the game and treat it as an equal Fire Emblem game, but history shows us this is not the case over and over again. Closing statement. I did not mean for this to further divide the Fire Emblem community. I apologize for snapping at so many top Fire Emblem veteran players, when I only have issues with a few. I only noticed that history was starting to repeat itself again, for the 10th consecutive Fire Emblem game in a row. Fire Emblem Heroes seems to be the game to finally get us all together behind one title, and I would hate to have a few bad eggs return the Fire Emblem community back to us versus them 2 years after release for the 10th time in a row. If anyone has a problem with that, see me in Aether Raids. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a happy new year. Obviously this is all a joke and in good fun, and I in no way, shape, or form believe any of what was just said. It's all a play off the popular Smash community drama that has been going on recently. I'll leave a bunch of links in the description for people who don't know what I'm talking about and would like to read further about it. And yeah, if you liked the video, like, share it, subscribe, and stay tuned for some more content. We're going strong in 2019. Peace.